So how many of you already know about map, filter and reduce?
Not really.
Map and filter?
Yes.
Okay. So suppose we have an array like this 2, 6, 1, 8 and 7, and I want to get a new array in which all elements have been doubled, multiplied by 2. So there are two ways to do it. First one is that I can create a for loop and then I say that so this will give me a new array. Make sense? If I have to double everything, then this is what I do. And if I just load this, you see that first one was this. I have a new array which is duplicate, which is not a duplicate but a new array, and all elements of first array are mapped to. So this is like an operation. So if I define a function, I'm just returning this, and I want to apply this operation on all of it, right? This is what I am doing. So same thing. So I can say I want to calculate a cube, and then I get the cube. No, like multiplied by 3, or I can say this, and it will give me a cube because x raised to the power 3. So this is one way to do it. This is called like using a for loop. You are doing some operation on each element of the array, and there is a new way to do it, a much better way in functional programming. So basically, you are mapping each element of the array to a different element, and to map you are using a mapping function, right? Here the mapping function is called double me. So whatever you are doing here, it's for each element. So the same way like if I do this and I give it a function, it will return a new array. So the way it's working is that suppose you have an array with some elements. One, two, three, four, 5, 6, and then you want to get a new array, and you are doing some operation on each element. So it's the same function is being applied to each element. So if this function is like square me, then you will get 1, 4, 9, So it takes, for each element in the array, you are calling the same function. The syntax is array.map, and then you have to give this function. So whatever elements you have in this array, it will go and apply that function. And so if you may have a very complex function, and but the syntax will be, you can have all your logic in this, and then you can call it like this. So what you need here is just a function. So one is that I have already defined a function which I am passing. A different way can be that I create an anonymous function. Like, given a value x, do something. So this will calculate the square root, right? If you okay, and if I just do this, and if I don't return anything, it will be undefined because this function is not returning anything. So in order to use map, you need to make sure that the function you are passing to the map operation, it should return a value. If you don't return anything, then by default the function returns undefined. Okay, and the difference between, like, here we had this array, right? I was using a for loop. If I ask you to say that, if I ask you to double all the elements of the given array, one thing you can do is that you can just change the value there itself, right? For you are replacing each element by doubling it, right? By doing some operation. So if I then it's getting changed. The array itself is getting changed. But when you do this map, it returns you a new array. So if I do array.map and some function, it's going to return me a new array. It will not change the existing variable. So these are two things you need to remember. You need to give a function which will
return.
What here?
Yeah.
I was showing that if you don't give return, then it will return undefined. Yeah. So when you write a function, you need to make sure that it returns a value, and if you use map, you will always get a new copy of the array, which is much safer because if you are mapping it to something, then you want to do some more operations. So it's better to not change the original variable. Okay, and this is array. This is the map, and suppose you want to again the same array 1, and if I want to get all the elements which are multiple of 2, then you want to filter. What it will do, that you want to check, you want to call a function for each element in the array, and if the function returns true, then it's included in the result. If it says false, then it's not included. So like it can be a queue of, like, on the airport or somewhere, that filter all the persons who are flying to Amsterdam from Copenhagen. So if you are given a list of travelers, you can do that, right? So in this case, like they are numbers, you can say that give me all the numbers which are greater than 5. Then what will you do for that? One way is the for loop. And then you have so you are going to test and then good. Do you get what is written? So for I'm iterating over the array, I'm getting the element, and then for each element I'm calling this function. It will return true if the number is greater than 5, and then if it's true, then I'm putting that array here.
That's really good.
But then what happens that since I'm using the index to put the array, put the element in the new array, and I'm saying that for the first element it will fail, right? It's not greater than 5. The second, for the second element it will pass. So you are saying that if you are going to use I, then you are saying that put 6 on the second position. Then first position is empty by default, right? Then you are getting empty. Instead of that, if I had to really filter it, then I should have used push. Then you will get a new array with just those elements. So this is the for loop, the correct way to do it using for loop. And if I have to do the same thing with the then I can do array1 dot filter and just check. It's so many lines of code, and here it's just this much. You can say that I have used extra lines. I could have written everything inside the if, right? But for the readability also, like this code is much more readable than this one. Here it tells me that I'm going to filter all the elements of the array which will pass this function. Like if the function returns true, then I just need to go and check the function. I don't need to worry about these many lines. So it's a much simpler approach.
In that case, the array will be changed. Original array will be changed.
No, it will not be changed.
We
If you use filter and map, you will always get a copy of the array. It will be a new copy. It will not be old. It has nothing to do with old. So the array will be new, but elements in the array will be old elements. So if they were like, if it was array of array and then or array of objects, the objects you will get will be the same objects which were in the old array. So if you change the attribute of the object, it will be changed for the old array also. But the array itself is new. So elements will not be changed, but it will give you new array.
Depends on the fact that if the value is a primitive or not.
Yeah.
So if it's a primitive, every element of the new array is going to be a copy, and that's completely different memory location, right?
Yes.
But in the case of objects, like let's suppose that our original array contains objects. In that case, when you copy an object, you're not actually doing a deep copy. So it's not like you have a memory location with one object and the copy with its own memory. No, you're just copying the reference. So in that case, you have to think about, okay, what I'm doing here. Is this really what I want? Because in the case of objects, then okay, you have to remember this. But in the case of primitive values, like in this case, which is a number, then okay, it's a copy. Because that's what happens when you copy primitive values.
Okay.
You have different memory locations.
So this is map and filter. It saves you a lot of code. And then there is third one, like what kind of operations you can do. You can map the array, you can filter the array, or you want to, like, you have a list of numbers, you want to get a sum of all the numbers, right? You want to aggregate them to one single value. So you have a list of something, you want to aggregate them together, like a list of persons, you want to aggregate their age, you want to know the total age of everyone combined, you want to know the average age of everyone. So if you have a sequence and you want to get one value for that sequence, it's called aggregation. That you are doing some operation which will be a single value, and but that single value is for a sequence. Like mean, max, maximum is also like. So if I have to add two numbers, add two numbers, x1, or say a and b, and you what you return a plus b. I am showing very simple examples here, but these functions can be really complex, and you can just pass them to the that map, filter, or reduce. So suppose I wanted to, like, I have the same thing. We'll call it 3. If I had to calculate a sum, how would I do it? First, the sum would be 0, right? And then in each operation, I will say sum equals and the ith element, and then I can log this sum, right? So for this array, this is the sum. So sum is different from other operations because here you need some initial value, and when you go through each element, you will take that initial value and do something with that element and return the updated value. So the initial sum was 0. I went to the first element, I updated the sum to 0 plus 2. Now the sum is 2. I go to the next one, I say updated sum plus this number, I get the updated value, and then so I am just reducing all of them to one value. So when you reduce the array to a single thing, it's reduction. You have to use reduce. If you want to get just few elements of the array using some rule, then you use filter operation. If you want to do something same for each element of the array, you use map. Okay. And this is the array syntax. And if you want to do it using reduce, then it can be dot reduce, and then you have to give an initial value, and this will be the sum. First argument is the function which will be used to reduce, and the second argument is the initial value. So if I say 100, it will be sum plus 100, and if I don't give anything, then it's taking 0 by default. The advantage, like you can see that if I was using a for loop, I had to use a let, because I had to update the value of this variable, right? But here I'm going to get a single value, so I can use const. So that way also this is better. You can be sure that since you can use const with reduce, that will not get changed in the same scope. Whatever value you give, so if you have an array like 2, 5, 6, 7, 8. So to reduce, you need to give the initial value, and whatever you give, it will take that one, the initial one, take that one, take this one, do some operations, and update this value. And take this one, do some operations, update this value. And take this one, updated value, and do some operations, and then. So if you are doing addition, you want the last value from the addition, the value of the current element, add them together and update the, because you are moving in this array ahead, right? So it can be a million, it can be of length like million elements, billion elements. So you will do element by operation. And whatever this function is, the reduction function, it takes two arguments. The current element's value and the last value. In case of sum, it will be 0. But if you have to multiply two numbers, then you would give 1. Because if you give 0, then the result will be 0. But if you give 1, 1 into the first element will be first element, and that into this element will be a product product. Like if you want to do division, then also you want to give 1. If you want to do addition and subtraction, then you want to give 0. And if you want to do some other operation, you may want to give some other initial value. It will depend on that operation. What kind of initial value does it need? But the syntax would be same. After dot reduce, you need first argument would be a function, second argument would be the initial value. And JavaScript will go and run that function for each element in the array, and it will give you one single value.
Should we always take two arguments for reduce?
Yes.
Okay.
You should always, like here if you don't put 0, it will take 0 by default. But you should not rely on that. You should always.
Okay, and second one should always be a number.
No, it will depend on the, like, suppose you wanted to.
No, okay.
The last part is an object, so depending on what objects you're using, that type of object you should provide, and that's your starting point.
Yeah.
So in this case it's numbers, so it's a 0.
So, like, if I was doing multiplication, and if I had given 0, then I would get 0. Because it will multiply with 0, right? But if I put 1, then I will get the correct outcome. So it's multiplication of all the numbers.
Okay.
So like if I want to calculate average in this case, then what would be the output? It would be reduce at two numbers divided by this is the average, right? Add everything and divide by the length. So this is the average 4.8. Okay. So are you comfortable with simple operations?
But like you first called multiply us, and then you did the okay
Here I have
reduce. Yeah.
I have used a separate
So
operation.
yeah, it's not the average of that number that is printed before, like the big number, like 600 something. It's just
This is
yeah.
sum, yeah.
Okay.
This is average. In the console log, you can put.
No, because sum actually is a multiplication because
Yeah.
sum equals sum. That's
Yeah.
So it's not Oh, no, okay.
There is a function called for each. Is it the same?
Yes, for each element, this function will be called.
No, there is an expression like
For each, no, that's different. For each is for iteration. So,
For each is the same thing as a loop, as a for loop, but
but
just
it's
have
a different
expression.
syntax. So, like if I wanted to do
Big differences between for each and the others like map, reduce, and filter.
for each will not return anything.
You're not creating a new object. So it's more similar.
It's just that you want to do something on each element.
It's like
Yeah.
you said loops.
Yeah. Just for looping. It's not an operation.
So you can just use for of in this case, for example. Do you know for of?
So there's this syntax. Another better syntax is like for const x of array. So the value of x would be the value of each element. So it's much.
What's this called? Cons.
So it's equivalent to for each. It's a different way.
It's equivalent to a for loop. Okay. So I want you to do some exercise like for 10 minutes or something. We have some time, right? 20 minutes. So
We still have the arrays arrow function as well.
yeah,
It's a event if
we can give this in homework.
it's a we are free in school. We are not going to school this week, so we can just do it.
Okay.
There's something called winter field, so it's
Yeah.
can it be changed?
Yeah.
Winter holidays are
No,
going on,
no,
right?
that's next Sunday.
No, so
It's winter. Yes, there's in March.
Okay, so
no, it's
I have a list of movies, like 6,527 movies. I got this data from IMDb, and it's a list of objects, like array of objects, and each one has a title, year in which it was released, and then rating on IMDb, and number of votes, and what is the running time in seconds. Okay.
This is a real.
Yeah, but this data may be old, but this is from IMDb. So
You sure we don't want to do arrow functions before they start that? It's gonna play into it.
yeah. So I don't know. We don't have much time, but yeah, I think
we can just, I mean,
We can talk about arrow functions and then do this assignment afterwards. It can be
Yeah.
the homework.
I mean, there's two properties of arrow functions. We can just get the first one, which is shorter syntax, so you can just use that. The second thing is about scope. But arrow functions is, I mean, it's a very simple thing, but it has some properties. And the thing which you can use in this assignment is just that it's shortens syntax a lot. Do you want to show them or should
Yes, I will.
Okay, just do it because I mean it's basically like another way to. It plays very well with reduce, filter, and map and all of those functions because it's just kind of shortens your syntax quite a lot by doing it that way. So I can show it to you.
This is what you should use actually, the
Yeah.
arrow function, unless you want an isolated
So
scope.
I was like, here I have used for each and then function keyword, right? And there is another way to do it. Like,
That's it.
given a value x, return x raised to the power 3.
So this is basically saying function without a name with an input x, then do this and return the value. If you put more lines, then you actually have to say which one is the return value. But if it's just one line, then the result of that is the return value of the function.
Sometimes I think that you can also write if and return
Like a single, like the else operator.
like one line.
Yeah, where you're like boolean, question mark, value.
Okay, question mark is for if or one.
Yeah, that's for
It's tertiary
What-
operator,
what-
ternary
what-
operator.
It's the ternary operator.
Huh?
What did you say? Ternary operator?
Yeah, what's what the return when you got return.
Yes, so like it can be like this. So if given a value x, if x
Oh, yeah.
is 0, then I want to return given. Otherwise, I want to return odd.
This question one is the return.
No,
So this means that if this is true, then return this. If this is false, the expression before the question mark. If it's true, then do this. If it's false, then do this.
wait, this one is for else. This two.
Yeah, that's a if else.
If
But
else.
I mean, it's not that much related to arrow functions, but it's just a general thing that you can shorten syntax.
So I'm just going to console log whatever we did. So console.log, we were doing greater than 5. And this time I'm doing less than 5. And here the same thing. And then, like if I have to reduce, then you will need two things, right? If you need more than one, then you need to put a parenthesis. And here we will return a plus b. It looks a lot more
Simple and easy to read. And
given two values a and b, return this value. And if the so first I will do this.
Just fix the word reduce.
Yeah. And if you have to do something which like the logic of the function, it needs more than one simple expression, then you can do this, like put a curly brace, and then you need to use return statement.
that's arrow functions. Yeah.
And the particular thing about the arrow functions is that you can access variables in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the second part of. They actually have two positive things. One is this that you can. Yeah. One is the short syntax, but the other thing is that each function usually defines its own this, like the variable this if you've seen it. Arrow functions don't, so they are very nice because if you have like some variables that were out, it's very often that programmers make this mistake that you're in a function, you say this, and I just want to refer to something that was on the other object, but you figure out, oh, actually I just created a new scope, so I don't have it there, and it's like, where is it? And then I have to assign it to another variable so I can keep it, and blah blah blah. But arrow functions just don't. I mean, they just grab the this that's closest to them and don't define their own. So it's much nicer, simpler.
Is this?
Yeah, it's much easier to use it because it doesn't define a lot of this. It's less confusing.
So look at this code for example. So I'm loading some movies from somewhere, but at this point, like here in this code, at this point I have a list of movies, an array. So I can filter the movies by rating. That rating is greater than 9.5. Then at this point I have an updated array, a duplicate copy of the array, and I can map and print the title. Right? So if I run this code, then there are 6, 5 to 7, but there is no movie with rating that high in this list at least. So let's print greater than 9. Yeah.
The Godfather. Yeah. I never heard about the first one.
I don't know.
It could be some other movie that has only 2 ratings and it's
Yeah.
No, so
Nine,
like
nine.
here we can return. If you just return this, then you will know the actual movie.
So in general, it just helps readability so much more.
Goats is 15,000. It was released in 2017. Right. So if you want to know all the movies which were released in year equals 2017 and x dot rating was greater than 8, then there are 10 movies out of this 65. So for the homework, there is some homework on the homework page, but I will push this whatever I have done here, like this whole thing and this code also, and then there will be a problem statement. I will push it on Slack. So you need to use this movies list and you need to print something, like print all the movies which were in 2016 and their rating was more than this, print their title. For all the movies in 2017, find the average rating, like you have number of votes, so you multiply rating by vote and then you add everything and then divide. So what was the most rated or most voted movie in this database, like for which the number of votes is maximum? Okay, and you can do a lot of things, so you should just, and it's a very simple data structure. Like it has just,
Yeah, one level.
Yeah. or find a movie for which runtime was more than 2 hours. So I can just
The
say
longest movies.
x dot, what was it, running times
There's also the function find, by the way.
Yeah.
Besides map, reduce, and
greater than equal to 70 to 100 seconds.
filter.
So it will give you, there are 1500 movies which have this kind of runtime.
Oh my god.
12 years a slave is a lot of time. Okay, and you can like find, so the way he said you can do, I think Benjamin must have told you about find operation, no? I think he taught, because that
It's the same like filter, but it just returns the first result that matches
So
the query.
like given a movie, I want to see that it has Godfather in the title. So x dot title dot to lowercase, right?
I don't remember.
Do you know why he is writing to lowercase? Yeah, so you control, because if there's some weird casing, you want to make sure that it gets the right, that you get the right casing, because it could be just.
So if I have a string, say Godfather 1, then I want to know
Less. Yeah.
So you control the condition.
What is the Wi-Fi index?
You have to because
So
it's
you have
because it's looking for the argument. Like, you have to pass what?
No, I want to know how do you check if it's a substring?
Is it what?
Substring.
You can just do substring.
Hmm?
I think there is substring.
Dot contents. Dot index of, okay.
The index of is gonna look for the whole thing anyway.
So if I search for something which is not here, then it will say -1. If it's there, it will say 0. There may be a better way to do it, but I just want to give a quick demo. So if it contains God in its name, then I want to get that movie. Makes sense now? So I am converting the title to lowercase because it may start with capital G, so I want to handle that case also.
Simple.
Soft movies.
Hmm?
Nothing important. Yeah. In line 137. Semicolons. Okay.
Make sure you equal one.
So the find returns the first element in the array which matches this operation. But if I want to filter everything, then I have to use filter. So that is the difference between filter and find. In filter, it will do that operation on each element. So I get 20 movies, but if I do find, it will return me the first element which matches. So the output is element, here the output is array. Right?
If I use this find like on click, so on each time I click it will find the next.
No, it will always, unless you remove that one that you found, because if you're doing it on the same array, it's always going to return the first one that
So-
matches.
Array.find takes a start index. If you put that start index and you keep updating that, then it will find the next one. So whenever you need, so like, yeah, call back. It takes index also. So
You can also see like there's reverse and there's
yeah,
other ones that you can use, but the logic is the same. You can pass in arrow functions to them and then apply the logic that you want over the array.
But we shouldn't make confusions between method on strings and method on arrays,
Yeah.
because we're dealing with both right now. But there could be some confusion. Like I was confused like some minutes ago about what we were doing, but yeah. So we have some methods that have the same name, but they are defined on different data structures. So both on array and on strings.
so like you can, you're getting the point, right? You can search for like in a array of length 6527. You're able to get just 20 if you put a query. So it's if you have data from the somewhere and you want to filter it, you want to do some mapping, like for each movie which contains God in its title, I want to have the number of votes and rating. Then I have to use the, after the filter, then I need to use the map also. That given a movie, return x dot rating, x dot votes, and then maybe x dot. So it gives me a nested array, and each element is an array. First element is this. Hmm?
gives you an array now?
Because I was returning an array for each element in the array, right? So filter will give me an array, and each element is an array with these three. Make sense? So I will push this code and then share the link of this code on Slack, and I will I will create a new homework for this, and this is also you need to do, because the homework for this week, that does not contain lot of things on array, map, reduce, and filter. It still needs you to do more practice with JavaScript API of GitHub, the Ajax API of GitHub. And you have to give some feedback to your partners, and I think you have to be in the same group, or maybe I think you have made some group, right? Yeah. You don't have any partner.
Too late for the class. And also, I have to pick up class first.
But do this homework. Like for the map filter, it's just pure JavaScript. Okay. So I will push this code. I have already created index.html. There is this review.js, and it already has some code. So you need to go here at line 134, like somewhere here, and you have to implement your code at this particular place. So it should be very easy, right?
We hope so.
Until the next Sunday.
Hmm?
Next Sunday.
Yeah, there's a
There's no
class.
certificate.
Yes.
I don't know, I think we should ask Chris, but as far as I know, there is a class.
Yes, there is a class.
There is a winter holiday in the schools.